Hello and welcome back to the Footy Frontline podcast brought to you by My Betting Mate. My name is Nick Tabano and I'm joined here by Ollie Caffrey to dive through all the King's Birthday weekend action and look ahead to round 14. Ollie, how are you feeling coming out of this weekend?
Yeah, big weekend. I don't think many people would have got a lot of tips right this weekend. If you got about 3 or 4 right, you're probably going pretty well. So if you got upwards of 5 or 6, you're fluking it.
Yeah.
There were some 50-50 games in there and a few upsets along the way. Even Richmond Adelaide on Thursday night, you thought, okay, that's the lock of the weekend. But yeah, the Tigers turned their form around with some stars back in.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously the round started last Thursday and finished on Monday with the traditional King's Birthday game, which Collingwood did come away with a comprehensive win over Melbourne. But the big talking point coming out of it was with the Ds, not necessarily with their plight on the field and their recent dip in form, but the situation surrounding Christian Petracca. He was subbed out of the game in the second quarter with a rib injury, a heavy knock after getting kneed by an accidental knee in a marking contest from Darcy Moore, and then surprisingly came back on the field despite, looking in quite a considerable amount of pain on the quarter time siren. Didn't look like himself. It turned out in the end that he had to go to hospital and the scans came back with a broken ribs, punctured lung, lacerated spleen and required surgery. And he's now going to be out for quite some time. I mean, Ollie, what do you make of this entire situation? Because this was I guess the way it's come out, it's an absolute disaster for Melbourne.
Petracca's been a star of the competition for a long time, but what's underrated is his courage and how tough he actually is. He's played 150-something games in a row. That's obviously going to end now, but yeah, he played a final a couple of years ago with a crack in his leg. He's just probably too brave for his own good sometimes, and yeah, as soon as he was hit on Monday, you knew something was wrong because he was in so much pain immediately. Goes off the ground. Obviously, desperate to play on a huge game, told the medical staff, put me back out there, see what happens. And, yeah, they thought, okay, let's see how it goes. But, yeah, there is no way he was able to go on after halftime. He was in extreme pain. You could see that straight away. And, yeah, taken to hospital and, yeah, the scans and all the tests revealed exactly how serious that injury is. And it's pretty hard to see him playing again this season. Some of those injuries can take up towards 6 weeks to be actually functioning and breathing and feeling okay again, let alone playing a game of footy. So, yeah, that is a huge blow for the Ds. And, yeah, just their season goes from bad to worse. Arguably their best player, probably second most important player after Max Gawn. He is going to be a massive loss for them, and he's someone they just really couldn't afford to lose. And, yeah, it was looking on. It was clear to see that he shouldn't have gone back on. There is no way he should have gone back on. The doctors allowed him to. The AFL has ticked it off. But yeah, when you see a player as tough as him in that much pain, something really serious has happened. So yeah, the AFL ticked it off. The teams have ticked it off, and Petracca has no issues with how it was handled. He put his hand up and said, "Yep, I really pushed to go back on the field, and yeah, it was my mistake." It was pretty commonplace back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. You go back to the 89 grand final and Dermot Brereton goes back on the ground after getting cracked ribs in the first contest, and even 2003 grand final, Nigel Lappin played a grand final with broken ribs and a punctured lung. But yeah, the game's come a long way since, and there has to be more of a duty of care. I think the doctors probably should have said, no, mate. We can tell.
13, yeah.
The punters in the stand could tell how serious he was. At home, watching on TV, you could see how much distress he was in. Just go and have other scans. And yeah, like you said, it's round 13. It's not a grand final. So yeah, he's going to miss a lot of footy. Personally, I can't see him playing again this season, especially if the Demons are looking like missing the finals, as they could be. They're in a lot of pain. That just topped off a dirty fortnight for them. Alice Springs, they got absolutely smashed, as we spoke about last week, and then, yeah, completely outplayed against an under-strength Collingwood team, just showed them up in all areas, even the midfield. Collingwood's B midfield basically just absolutely took them to the cleaners, and that's just embarrassing for the Demons. Clayton Olive looks a bit out of sorts. Max Gawn's doing his best, but he's one player, and they're just down in all areas at the moment, and looks like they're trying a bit too hard. Just the same problems are coming back to haunt them again. Just inaccuracy, dysfunction going inside 50. It's a real problem for them. And yeah, a big fall from grace for the Demons, considering after that 2021 premiership, you thought this could be a dynasty. There was such a young team at that point. They had so much going for them. Great midfield, superb backline, and yeah, they haven't won a final since. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, they made history last year as the first team ever to go out in straight sets in back-to-back years, which is one of the more unwanted records to have in Australian rules football. And I mean, yeah, it's going to be tough for them now because the foundation of Melbourne, I mean, there's been a lot of chat about identity over the last few weeks. Simon Goodwin spoke about they went away from that identity a little bit and they didn't really know where they were. And he said that there was some positives, but the defence was defence first and then having been really good at the contest. But when you lose that, what is Melbourne? You know, their forward line, you know, when it gets to a shootout, we know that they really struggle to be able to keep up with good attacks or even an attack that's able to maybe kick 90 points in a game. It's, you know, we don't usually see Melbourne kicking a big score, and right now they're finding themselves in a world of hurt. And yeah, when they come back, I mean, with Christian Petracca now out for, as you mentioned, more than likely at least an indefinite period of time, it's going to be very, very hard for them to get themselves back into the hunt to not only just, you know, compete in the top 8, but actually make it full stop, because there'll be teams that are just below them. When you look at the form of Hawthorn, the win that Brisbane had over the Bulldogs, which we'll talk about a little bit later, they're starting to find form and they're starting to get themselves sorted. And if a team like Melbourne's sort of, you know, spiralling, then who knows what that could mean for the second half of the year. One team that is the epitome of the opposite of that is Sydney right now, because they just look like they can't be beaten. They were down by 35 points against Geelong. This game, not that it seemed over, but Geelong were in full control. It looked like a potential upset was on the cards. But then Sydney just turned the game right around and won the game quite convincingly in the end. They're 11-1. They're 8 points clear atop the ladder with a game in hand on Carlton, who are in second. This is an incredible start that, you know, we haven't seen too often, where usually is one team that's maybe 3 or 4 games ahead of everybody else. But Sydney are well and truly the flag favourites heading into the second half of the year right now.
Oh, absolutely. They're streets ahead of everyone else. You went into that game thinking the Swans should win, but coming off the bye, what are they going to be like? And yeah, a super slow start, an uncharacteristic first quarter, just not in the contest at all. But then they just flicked the switch. 16 goals in the last 3 quarters. Didn't kick a goal until early in the second quarter. Geelong looked way too good for them. But yeah, once they're up and going, they're unstoppable, especially at the SCG. They've made that a proper fortress again. They didn't have the best record there for a few years. They were probably winning more games away than they were at home. But yeah, one of the biggest crowds, home and away crowds, the SCG in history. And they were turned into a show on Sunday afternoon. It was just brilliant from Brodie Grundy. He is the recruit of the year. He has found his form again, probably back to his All-Australian best at the moment. I reckon he was, the coaches' votes didn't address it, but I personally thought he was best on ground in that game. Chad Warner, sensational again. Errol Goulden. Papley was a bit quiet early, but got going with a brilliant spell late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, and that put the game to bed. But yeah, their best start to a season since 1935. It's just amazing what this footy club's doing. A bit of a disappointing finish to last season, considering they made the grand final 2022, had to storm home just to make the finals last year and were cooked, and yeah, beaten by Carlton in that elimination final. But yeah, their younger players are just so exciting, and they don't have any weaknesses that I can see at the moment. But we've seen it before. I'll probably go back to Geelong in 2008. The last time a team was this far ahead at this point in the season. Geelong only lost 1 game for that whole season. We've seen other seasons where maybe 2 teams are on top of the ladder, way ahead. 2009, Geelong St Kilda, 2011, Collingwood and Geelong, they were just way ahead of everyone else. But yeah, it's Sydney and then complete daylight at the moment. So yeah, Swans fans should be getting pretty excited, but it is still pretty early. So they might be a bit nervous thinking, have we peaked too early? But at this stage, I can't see any team beating them in September.
Well, I think it's the case of if they lock in that home qualifying final and then you win that, you're guaranteed basically a spot in the grand final because, as you mentioned, no one's beaten them at the SCG. They're 6 wins from 6. They've won all those games by an average margin of 36 points as well, which is quite incredible to think that no one's really been able to lay a glove on them at the SCG. I think really only Essendon gave them a bit of a push. I mean, Geelong pushed them early, but it just seems like they just blow teams out as the game wears on. And right now, I mean, it'll be interesting when it comes to finals time when, that we start to see that pack form. It is very tight at the moment. I think the top 8 is still just all over the place. There really isn't a semblance of order in there at all. And there are teams that are getting fit, teams that are starting to find their rhythm. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens in the weeks ahead for the Swans. Let's look ahead to round 14 this week. It all starts on Friday night. No more Thursday night footy, which is a tremendous shame that the week starts a little bit later. Yeah. So we've gone from one of the longest rounds of the season from Thursday to Monday to now going to once again being used to having to fill our time
Sunday.
on.
It's very quaint.
Yeah. Have to fill our time on Thursday, getting back into Netflix or whatever else we can because used to having Thursday night footy. But Friday night, Brisbane and the Saints at the Gabba. Brisbane, big winners against the Bulldogs. They needed that response and they got it. It was a very impressive win at Marvel Stadium. The Saints, they've won back-to-back games. A bit of controversy about the circumstances in the way that they beat Gold Coast. It's a game that I think for most, they'll be putting that one up high in the shelf and not going to be one to watch on the replays anytime soon.
Name a game back in the day. You're definitely not ordering that one.
No,
on the DVD.
Absolutely not. You'd have to be the most diehard of St Kilda supporter to be looking back at that one. But these two sides meet at the Gabba. It's a big one for both these two teams because essentially is still season on the line for both these sides who are looking to try and make some ground on the top 8.
Yeah, the Saints just did what they had to do. It was just ugly. We knew it was going to be ugly in the mud, even though it was under the roof at Marvel Stadium, 7 goals each. But yeah, it was controversy late, but St Kilda were the better team during that game. The Suns, there is no reason why they should have lost that game, but were disappointing early, had a run on late, got in front. But yeah, Saints were in front most of the night and deserved to win overall, I thought. But yeah, the Lions on Friday night against the Bulldogs, very impressive. I think probably their best performance of the season, coming off arguably one of their worst. So yeah, really good response after the bye. Chris Fagan said that, a lot of honest conversations during the bye and said, look guys, we're actually doing a lot of things right. Apart from a couple of games, the GWS game and a few quarters here and there, they were doing a lot of things right. And yeah, that sort of faith and the confidence just came out in spades on Friday night, and they were super impressive. Lachie Neale back to his sublime best, and yeah, Jared Berry's tagging role on Marcus and Bontempelli, that just set the tone for the whole win. They were just ahead at halftime. Bontempelli only had 6 possessions. Berry had 14, and that was game over. It was such a crucial matchup. But yeah, back at the Gabba, they haven't been there for a few weeks now with the bye and a couple of games on the road. So yeah, their form's been a bit patchy there this season, but you'd think against the Saints, they should get the job done. They won't have it as attacking and as probably easy. Some of the goals came against the Dogs, but yeah, they should get the job done by 5 goals, I think, just at the Gabba. And yeah, they'll even the ledger, even though they've got the draw in there, they'll go 6 and the 1 draw, and they'll be back in contention. And it's just now if they can string together that consistent form. That's the benchmark, that Bulldogs game.
Yeah.
Right throughout the game, Eric Hipwood, 6 goals, sensational. We know he's probably not going to do that every week, but if you can get that sort of contest from him in the air, on the ground, he was superb. So, yeah, I think the Lions win this one pretty comfortably, but won't have it all their own way.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a spectacle. I think, as we know, this game, what St Kilda would want is to make this tight, make it scrappy. I wonder if, I haven't had a chance to have a look at what the forecast is going to be like in Brisbane, but if it is sort of one of those humid nights, it probably suits St Kilda, who could probably try and make this as, try and make it as low scoring as possible. But I think at the Gabba, Brisbane win this game. I think that win against the Bulldogs was the spark they needed. And as we've seen, like last year with Carlton and with GWS, that, you have that one win which can turn around the fortunes and you can find that momentum and peak at the right time going into finals. Brisbane have the capability and the quality to do it. And I think they'll beat St Kilda. I think as much as St Kilda with 2 wins in a row, I don't want to go flat out and say it's a false storm, but it's not as if, they came out and beat Sydney and Collingwood. Well, they already actually beat Collingwood this season, but so they came out and beat Sydney and maybe Carlton or something like that, and they were quite convincing wins. They were quite scrappy results. We know Gold Coast struggles away from home, whether it's been in Gold Coast or Darwin. So I think Brisbane win this one quite handy. And you mentioned Lachie Neale, 25 plus disposals, looking the goods there. Saturday afternoon, Bulldogs versus Freo. This is a massive game for both these two teams because the Bulldogs will be chomping at the bit to get back after... You'd think that after beating Collingwood and trying to find some momentum was a very disappointing result against Brisbane. Fremantle, fresh off the bye, fresh off a massive win against Melbourne prior to that, looking to really solidify themselves in the top 8. This game looks like it could be a bit of a coin flip here.
Absolutely. The Dogs, if they're not doing it in the midfield, they're going to really struggle because their forward line, it's under strength at the moment. Still no Sam Darcy for this game. Still another game suspension. Aaron Norton's still out. Cody Waitman's still out. So, Bonampelli, even though he was held in the midfield last week, pushed forward and kicked 3 goals. And, you sort of need a few of the Bonds at the moment just because he's filling so many gaps. So, we know Freo are probably going to make it. Even though their last start was a brilliant attacking performance up in Alice Springs, it's probably not going to be a shootout under the Marvel Stadium roof. So I just think the Dogs, just their lack of forward options at the moment, it's just going to be really tough for them. Fremantle's defence is obviously superb. Jordan Clark's been really good off halfback and a lot of the footy. Their midfield's just really good. So, if the Dogs aren't winning in the midfield, and they were smashed against the Lions, absolutely smashed, especially in that first half in clearances. Luke Bavary conceded after the game that you're not going to win basically any game of footy if you go down nearly 20 in clearances. So, then midfield needs a massive lift if they're going to get it done. Tim English has been pretty disappointing this season, out of contract soon, so the Dogs want to tie him up. But, he's really been a bit underwhelming this season. And, Liberatore still getting back into it. It's his first game back. So I think Freo, their form's been pretty good on the road this season. And the confidence they would have got out of that win against Melbourne, just they can do it on the offense now. Like, they've shown they're a really good defensive team. Their midfield's really good. But, those options up forward now are really starting to come to the fore. So I think the Dockers.
Yeah, I think Freo win this game as well. I think, as you mentioned, their form away from home in particular is quite encouraging. I think when you look back at, in history and in years gone by, there's always been a lot of talk about when some of the teams from WA haven't been able to travel well, it's always worked against them. It's, it's been tough for them to really find momentum. But Freo this year have looked really good away from there. And I think at Marvel Stadium, they'll get the job done. I just think, the Bulldogs at the moment are just too inconsistent. They're too streaky. I think as much as they got that win against Collingwood, they really had to do it tough against a Collingwood team that were right down to their bare bones and probably should have won that game, a lot more convincingly when you look at the two teams that were out in the park that day, as much as the Bulldogs had their own injury concerns. But I think Fremantle close this one out. They get the win. They've got some momentum. They're in a bit of a flow at the moment. And I think they come away with a tight 2 or 3 goal win. Jordan Clark, though, as you mentioned, looking good for 25 plus in this one.
Those odds are juicy, by the way. 218 for the Dockers. The Dogs 169. It should be the other way around, in my opinion.
Yeah,
gamble responsibly, but they are very juicy.
Well, that might change as we get closer towards the start of that game on Saturday. The other game on Saturday across town is Richmond versus Hawthorn. Dusty will be back for game 300. Richmond finally got themselves their second win of the year. It was a gallant win on the road against the Crows. They're taking on Hawthorn at the moment, who are red hot. I mean, about a week or so ago, I would have thought this would probably be a Hawthorn victory, but given the spectacle, given Richmond getting a Tom Lynch back as well, this game suddenly becomes a lot more interesting because we know Richmond are going to be up for this. You'd expect there's going to be a decent crowd out there as well, even though Richmond have struggled this season, to get behind and celebrate one of the greatest players, not only in Richmond history, in the history of the game, in Dustin Martin. I mean, this is an interesting one on Saturday twilight.
Oh, really interesting game. I haven't tipped the Hawks a lot this season. I did last week against GWS, just down in Tassie, but I reckon they might be due for a loss here. Just everything is pointing towards a Richmond win, in my opinion. Dustin Martin's 300th. He's fresh off a break last week, didn't travel to Adelaide. They still got the job done without him. And as you mentioned, Tom Lynch back in that forward line. The last game Tom Lynch played, Richmond beat Sydney. So that just says how important he is to that structure, because without him, they don't have that big focal point. And yeah, big forwards still have a place in modern day footy, and he's certainly one of the best. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing spectacle. Like, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Dusty not doing any press and everything like that, but I don't think he really has to. Just his personality and just the love I think the game has for him. Just obviously the Tiger supporters like hold him right up there as probably the greatest Tiger they've ever had. 3 Norm Smith medals, 3 premierships in 4 seasons. Considering where that footy club was at, 37 years between premierships, and then they have 3 in 4 seasons, and he's a central figure in all of them. He is just a legend of that footy club, and will probably one day be a legend of the AFL, considering what he did. Just enigma, but just an absolute superstar. And yeah, I reckon they'll get up towards 80,000 there on Saturday afternoon. I think this is a Tasmanian replacement game for Hawthorn, so Hawthorn members have better access than they normally would for an away game. So this is going to be an absolute, really cracking game. But I think the Tigers will make it 2 in a row and inflict a bit of pain back on the Hawthorn, because Richmond's record against Hawthorn is very strong over a number of years. So I think that might sway it even further for me.
I think the Tigers get up for this one. I think Dusty's got a classic game in so already.
He's the ultimate big game player.
I get a feeling that he's gonna pull something out, and this will be one of the great Dustin Martin games that we've maybe not right up there with his best, but I think we're going to see
outside of the finals.
Yeah. I think we're going to see. My tip is multiple goals for this game. I think he's going to get a lot of the ball as well. And I just think the occasion is going to really, lift Richmond.
Loves the occasion.
And you look at the losses they had against Essendon and Geelong, they were so competitive. It just was a personnel thing. All these injuries that they've copped, they have been brilliant over the last 2 weeks. They've been much improved. I actually think that they go to the MCG and beat Hawthorn. As much as Hawthorn have been very good, they've been a lot better over this period, and they're looking like a team who could potentially,
really
sneak into the 8. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they still manage to win this game. But I just think that, with everything that's going to be lined up, if this becomes, even though it is 2 Victorian teams, if those Tigers fans come out and the Tiger Army's up and about, I think the Tigers might be able to come away with the 4 points in that one. Saturday night over at Adelaide Oval, Adelaide versus Sydney. Adelaide's season is all but shot now, if it wasn't already. A very disappointing loss against Richmond last week. It's been a disappointing patch for Adelaide. Really, just every time it seems like there's a glimmer of momentum, a glimmer of hope, it just has, 2 bad results that come from it. There's been a lot of talk in the local media as to where the Crows are at, and Mark Rasciuto came out and really was trying to say to stick behind the team and galvanise them. A lot of pressures on him and the hierarchy at the moment, because this is now another year without finals ever since the 2017 grand final.
Been pressure on Rasciuto for 6 years. It's amazing he's still on that board, to be honest. He's survived a lot, and pressure's still going to come for him.
Yeah.
The way they're travelling.
Absolutely. And I mean, these 2 teams met in very different circumstances last year. And this was the famous, bit of controversy with how this game finished last time, which...
Absolutely. That is going to be a little side plot to this game.
So obviously that famously robbed Adelaide of a finals place last year, and Sydney were the benefactors. But this time around, it's so different. Sydney clear at the top of the ladder. Adelaide... They need something. They may get Taylor Walker and Isaac Rankin back this week, but even if they do get them back, will it be enough to cause one of the great upsets of the year?
I don't think so. Maybe if the Sydney Swans are complacent, like you said, 2 games clear on top of the ladder, the percentage, it's basically 3 games clear. It'd have to take something ridiculous for them not to be the minor premiers now. So maybe complacency creeps in, but if Adelaide can't beat Richmond at the Adelaide Oval, what hope have they got of beating the Sydney Swans, who are on top of the ladder? I just can't see it happening. But there obviously will be a bit of fire in the Crows' belly after what happened last week against the Tigers, but also going back to last year too. I think the fans will be out there, might get the passions running. But the Swans just have too many good players across the ground. It's been mentioned a lot this week, but Adelaide just haven't recruited well over a number of years. They've lost players to other clubs too. Players have left, especially after that 2017 grand final. That period there was really bad period for them, and they just haven't replenished. I think they overachieved last year, to be honest. They probably had a softer draw coming off a bottom 6 sort of finish in 2022. Took advantage of that, won most of their home games last season. But I just don't think their list is up to scratch. Like you saw last week without Taylor Walker, without Isaac Rankin, they just had nothing. Their forward line, you can't... Darcy Fogarty's not the number one man. He's a good number 2 in that forward line, but he's just not a number 1. You need Tex Walker, and that's just a worry. Taylor Walker's in the twilight of his career, had an All-Australian season last year, but he's not going to be around forever. Who are the replacements there? So, yeah, the Swans do it easy for mine, and yeah, we'll heap more pressure on the Crows and Mark Rasciuto.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge Sydney win. I would be shocked. I know football can be a funny game. We do see the upset from here and there, but I just think Sydney are just playing on another level at the moment. Adelaide's confidence seems a little bit shot at the moment. And Errol Goulden for 30 plus, so he's been in some great form. That midfield 3, including Grundy 4, is just one of the best. I mean, I think it was Jared Waitley and David King talking about it, that, usually when you look back at some of the great eras and the great teams, there's always been a big 3. I mean, you look at what Brisbane had with, Black Voss, Ackermanis, West Coast with Judd Kerr and Cousins. There's another semblance of that building in Sydney where these guys, who knows how good.
Yeah, they're all so young.
Yeah.
And he's probably in the middle of his career now, but yeah, Goulden and Warner still very, very young and just dominating.
And the scary thing is they could get even better when they get players back. So this team could still go to another level.
Callum Mills, the captain, still not there yet.
Exactly.
He's still to come back.
And Luke Parker,
out,
he's still suspended. Like there's still so much, so much depth in this Sydney team. So it'll be fascinating to see after, this sort of bye period where things go for the Swans. Sunday afternoon at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne against Collingwood. Finally, the Kangas won a game. They were up big. I mean, Jared Healy went early and he said, it's going to be a fun last quarter for these North Melbourne supporters. Then West Coast came in and I think they kicked 6 in a row and they hit the front, and then, a late goal from Jai Simpkin won the game. Paul Curtis obviously won the game for the Kangas. Yes, very controversial to the point Adam Simpson did his best sort of Jose Mourinho impression. If I speak, I'll be in big trouble. But the Kangas, they're off the mark in a year where it looked like it could have been, in all due respect, at one point it could have been a winless year, but they got the job done over in Perth. They take on a Collingwood team who got a very convincing win over Melbourne on King's birthday. Do you give the Kangas a chance? Can they go 2 in a row, or do you think the Pies flex before their bye?
No, I don't think so. The Kangaroos, they were really good. They had a crack. The Eagles were diabolical. They were so bad. They were back to their 2022, 2023 form. No Harley Reid, no Eagles, it seems. So, disappointing result for the Eagles. But, North Melbourne, superb. Yeah, just had a crack. Even when they challenged, you thought once the Eagles got in front after kicking 6 goals in a row, they'd kick 2 goals up until three-quarter time and then kick 6 in a row to hit the front. You thought, with the home crowd, there is no way West Coast are going to lose this game, and North Melbourne are just going to be in for the worst heartbreak ever.
Yeah.
They've already endured so much. And this is going to happen, but they got the job done and, broke that big losing streak. So, good for the Kangaroos and all their players and supporters. So, great to see. But, this is another challenge entirely. You go from playing last year's wooden spooners to last year's premiers. So, I think Colin would get the job done pretty easy. They were very, very good against Melbourne on King's birthday. Doesn't seem to matter who's in there. They just have that system going and just play with that connection that Craig McRae has brought to this club. They just, one soldier out, one soldier in. So, Collingwood should get it done pretty comfortably, up towards 10 goals, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, North Melbourne, as you mentioned, like, if they had lost that, you talk about lowest of lows. Like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't have even wanted to imagine. Like, I already feel
just give
sorry
up on footy, wouldn't you?
I mean, how many wins have they seen over the last few years? To be less than 10, like, and to think that, that they were that close to losing that game and they're up by so much. It would just been, you'd think, what have we done to deserve this? What have we done to anger the football gods? I mean, look, you know what? They got the job done for North Melbourne. I think, all that talk about playing home, that Victorian team should play a few home games in Perth. Maybe North Melbourne might be okay with it.
They love it over there. They've been free over there too.
Yes, I think they've won 2 of their last 4 in Perth.
So 50% strike rate. It's a lot better than everywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe they'll be one of the teams that, say, all right, we'll take a game to off the stadium, no issues.
Take a couple.
Yeah.
Once Tasmania's out of the picture.
Absolutely.
Go to Perth.
And obviously you mentioned Collingwood were very good against Melbourne. From the word go, they were up for that game. They, were really, their pressure was amazing. The kids really stood up, even with Nick Dacos having his most quiet game of the year, being tagged out of the game by Alex Neil-Bullen, then subbed out with a cork. It was just all those other players standing up. And my tip is...
another Dacos. I thought he was stiff not to get the medal, to be honest. I thought he was tremendous.
34 disposals for Josh. But, one of the players that stood up was Nathan Kruger, and I think he's going to kick multiple goals. He's always been someone that's shown when he's played that when he can stay fit, that he can cause a bit of problems for opposition defenders, but it's always been an issue with his body. Probably more for Collingwood fans out there. They remember a forward, by the name of Sean Rusling back in the day.
I remember Sean Rusling.
Sean Rusling would always play well in the seniors, but after 2 or 3 good games, he'd always get injured, and there'd always be injury after injury. I hope we don't have the same issue with Nathan Kruger, because when he plays well, he plays really well, and you're like, this is what we could have, and then there's always just an unfortunate turn. So hopefully it's the start of something special for him, and I think he'll kick multiple goals against quite a depleted North Melbourne defence, and the Pies win this one comfortably. Final game of the round over in over in Homebush, GWS versus Port Adelaide at NG Stadium. The Giants, a disappointing loss against Hawthorn. Down in Tassie, the Power coming off the bye. Obviously, they lost against Carlton just before the bye as well. So both teams desperate to get back on the winners list. GWS really have fallen off after that incredible start to the year. They were looking like a real flag favourite. But now there's probably some questions about, are they actually going to get in given their current form right now?
I think they're going to get in, but it's really concerning, just the drop-off. Yeah, since that Lions game when they looked just unbeatable, just steamrolled over the top of them. And early in the season, they looked untouchable and they're premiership favourites for a reason. But since that Lions game, they've been really off the boil. They have a few injuries like most clubs do. But to lose to Hawthorn as well, Hawthorn are taking a lot of scalps. So it's not the most terrible loss on paper, but it's all starting to add up now. Their last game at home at Giants Stadium, NG Stadium, they lost against the Bulldogs. We just totally destroyed that night. That game, I think, sort of went under the radar. It was a twilight game, and you thought, oh, geez, Giants kicked 4 goals for the night and two individual goal kickers. It was just extraordinary. So, but this is a sneaky game of the round to finish it off Sunday twilight in Western Sydney. So, it should be a really intriguing game, and the Giants just have to win. They just absolutely have to win. A home game, Port Adelaide can be big and consistent. They might get Connor Rozee back, so that would be a huge boost for the Power. But, the Giants just have to get it done. Otherwise, like you said, they will be in genuine doubt of missing finals. But I think they do get the job done here and, win by about 20 points. Yeah, I think GWS fresh off, not fresh off the bye. Port Adelaide covering fresh off the bye, but GWS fresh off that defeat, raring to go back at home. They do need to start getting some players back in the coming weeks, which I think will make them better when they get your Kellys and your Canelios back in there. They will go to that other level. They've hurt, but that tsunami is gone from, the brilliant sort of wave of pressure and their sensational just front to back football. It's not there anymore. And I feel like they've got to get back to that, get back to their identity, because when they are playing at that, sort of free flowing level where they're just monstering teams, they're so hard to stop. And I think they're going to be too good for Port Adelaide, who still have some questions about where they sort of sit in and amongst this race for finals. They've had some good wins. They've had some wins where they've been really disappointing, and they've had some just losses as well, which have been really poor. So if they're going to make a bit of a statement and get a win, this is the sort of game to certainly do it and really solidify themselves as a team to watch in the second half of the year. That's it from us today here on Footy Frontline. Enjoy all the action in round 14. We'll be back next week to review all the round 14 action, look ahead to round 15. Thanks again for joining me, Ollie. Thanks, Nick.